Good morning. Start of a new week, and Celtic are back to winning ways in the league campaign. 3-0 against Ross County on Saturday. Sean and Alison alongside me, Andy, as normal on a Monday. A fairly routine win against Ross County, guys. We'll come to that, though, because I think we need to acknowledge and discuss the other things that have been happening at Celtic over the last couple of days. The shock departure of Chief Executive Don Mackay came out of the blue. Alison, you've been digging into it and covering it a wee bit. You've written a column for the Celtic Way website this morning. So for anyone who's unsure on actually what might have happened here, what do you know?
I think at the minute what we know is that Don Mackay has obviously left his post. I think it did take everyone by surprise. I know there were whispers on Thursday evening. I'm not sure how seriously they were taken until it got to mid-afternoon on Friday when news emerged. My own feeling is that I suspect there will be further changes now to follow. And I think it's maybe the perception will be that it feels as though it's a level of instability again within the club, just because it's played out in public. I think when you have these changes, and the optics of it never look particularly good. But the piece you referenced today, I do think that the club remain on a very firm financial footing. I think changes are required. I think there is an element of modernisation required. But I don't think it's maybe quite as chaotic as the perception might be at the minute.
Is it always made to look worse, those optics that you mentioned, when it's out the blue like this?
I think so. I think it adds to the drama of it, doesn't it? I think it adds to the sense of unrest and something going on behind the scenes. I'm not sure that. Certainly, I can only speak for myself. I had no inkling at all of it coming. I didn't suspect anything. I was completely unaware of any issues that might have been behind the scenes. And I think at the minute you would stress that, we hear one element of things and you hear certain aspects of things that are going on, but it's only one side of a story at the minute. I think you just have to reserve judgment for now and see the direction that the story starts to take.
So Celtic said that it was for personal reasons that Don Mackay left. Do you expect that sort of clarity to become more widely known in the coming weeks and months?
I'm not sure if it will, to be honest. I think contractually and legally, I'm not sure if that becomes a possibility. I think you might hear snippets, but largely I think the legalities that surround that make it quite difficult, unless of course there is a decision, if that's possible for certain people maybe to speak publicly if they wish or if they can do that. It might not always be legally possible. So I think at the minute it's a watch and see, really, to see what comes next.
Where do you think Celtic do go from here in this regard? Because this was an appointment, I think, with the appointment of Ange Postecoglou as well. The two of them new in the door working together. It was supposed to bring quite a lot of excitement. It hasn't really worked out that way as far as Don Mackay is concerned. Of course, Ange Postecoglou's impact on the first team affairs has brought a lot of excitement. But what next for Celtic then for the CEO position? Michael Nicholson's in at the moment. Is that a long-term solution?
I think that might come down to whether or not Michael Nicholson would like it. I think he's quite reserved. I don't know Michael except from a professional distance through watching his dealings with the club. I think he's spoken particularly well at AGMs. I think he's very well thought of. I think he's very capable of the chief exec role, but I think he's reluctant to be in the limelight. I think he prefers to work in the background. I suspect that when Peter Law was stepping down, there might have been an offer there to take the chief exec post at that time. I think if he didn't fancy it, I'm not sure that he, if anything, would have changed in the short term since then. I think you just have to wait and see now and see how it develops.
There is certainly a narrative at the minute that the Celtic board are in a bit of chaos and there's mayhem just floating through the halls at Parkhead. But I think that in your column you're referencing some of the deals that have been done recently to make sure that Celtic do have money coming in. And Iron, Edouard this summer, Tierney a few summers ago, Frimpong went for good money in the window recently as well. So you're very much, I don't quite say sticking up, but just providing context to the situation.
Just trying to offer a rational look at things. I think at the minute, I think particularly when things are framed on the back of last season and how chaotic it got on the pitch, I think it lends itself to a narrative that everything's a mess, that everything's in flux, that everything is chaotic. And my own feeling would be that I'm not particularly sure how accurate that is. And the point I was making is that financially Celtic remain on a very, very solid footing, which is a large part of the business of a PLC board, is to protect the business interests of the club. I think if you look at it that way, at the minute, the club are sitting with money in the bank. There's not been any kind of financial tremor, despite the effects of COVID and the pandemic and the loss of revenue that affected so many clubs and so many businesses in a global capacity. I think if you look at player sales from January, you would not be far off the £50 million mark of money generated. Players that were signed, players that there were question marks over and scepticism because it didn't quite fit into the system, Patrick Klimala and etc. I think we're still sold on at profit. I think the only player that Celtic have brought in recent years and sold and made a loss on was Marian Shved. So I think ultimately the point I'm making is that the financial foundations that are there for any movement forward are fairly solid. Whatever happens in whatever direction the board go in over the next few months, it doesn't take a great deal of work to get it right. And the other thing I would say is I think these aspects of a club come to the fore hugely when things aren't working on the park, such as last season. But I think when you're winning games and winning trophies, I think these kind of conversations become little more than background noise.
Sean, is it amplified then because Celtic haven't been incredibly successful over the last 12 months or so?
I think that would probably logically follow, but there was still murmurs, obviously not shouts, but murmurs of complaint when they were winning anyway. I think what I would say is I think Alison's right to say it's not a mess, because it's certainly not a mess in the way that some other Scottish clubs have had to deal with messes at boardroom level. It's certainly not at that level of stuff. That said, I do think it's far from ideal regardless of the reasons behind Don Mackay's departure. And I think the fans have every right to be concerned about it, both in isolation and in terms of the general kind of malaise that seems to have been around the club at executive level the past wee while. I think that they've every right to think that and be concerned about it. I think it was interesting yesterday that Ange Postecoglou was obviously asked about both the boardroom stuff and the kind of fan reaction to it. And although he didn't really let himself be drawn too much into it, he did come away with a couple of interesting things. Like you probably saw, he mentioned a sentence along the lines of "we have to be careful with the narrative of kind of who brought me to the club," which I thought was an intriguing thing to have said, given that Don Mackay very much kind of tried to make a point of showing Ange was his man, if you want to put it that way, back in June. He also mentioned the fans putting up a banner questioning the board by saying sometimes it's good to be kept on your toes, which to me suggests that he has no problem with people pointing things out when it has some merit. To kind of reiterate what Alison said again there, I'd done the kind of points from the presser yesterday, taking all of that in, and I ended it with the phrase "watch this space," and Alison's kind of alluded to that already, because I think that's exactly what most fans will be doing, to see if this interim appointment of Michael Nicholson starts to kind of smell of the same old, or if the proposed modernisation is to get underway properly.
What did the proposed modernisation? Because I think you referenced in your column as well, Alan, not to give away any spoilers for anyone who wants to go and give a wee read at it, but you were talking about Don Mackay's preference for a sporting director, I think, and that was an option that probably wasn't a priority.
My own personal view would be that I can see the merit in a director of football and a head of recruitment, particularly the head of recruitment. I think it's a glaring omission at the minute within the infrastructure of the club. I think it's hugely necessary. I think it takes some of the weight off the manager and off the board in some respects too. I think that there's merit to in looking towards a European structure that would have a director of football at the helm. But I think certainly ahead of recruitment at the minute, it seems like a no-brainer.
When you look at the success of some clubs, and Brentford have been mentioned, Sevilla have been mentioned, the success that they have when they follow these lines of structure and way that they work as an operation, it's quite hard to get your head around why there would be scepticism to that. I know that it can uproot quite a lot of things maybe and a lot of change for people to get used to, but when you look at the success that they've had, is it not a route worthwhile exploring?
Yeah, without doubt. And I certainly think when you look at clubs who have beefed up their analytics department and you're looking at small gains and you're analysing games in depth and your sports science department is heavily involved in that too, I think you see the merit. I think you see the rewards that it brings. I think it's a very modern way to look at the game and interpret the game. I think there probably is some scepticism about it, but I think over the last 5 years, you've seen the rewards for clubs who have invested in that.
Right, well, we'll have a wee chat now about Ross County because it was important that Celtic got back to winning ways. That was a couple of defeats in a row, although that one against AZ Alkmaar in aggregate, beaten over in Holland and then beaten by Rangers. So Ross County, Sean, was quite a good fixture, I think, to come along next in the fixture list. It's a game that Celtic should be winning 99 times out of 100 and probably do, even though that County have had the number last season. What did you make of the game overall?
I thought while the scoreline obviously didn't reach the heights of the kind of 6-0, I thought the dominant nature of Celtic's play was still there, maybe without as much of a cutting edge as the last couple of domestic home matches, right enough. They were fortunate with the first goal, clearly. But I thought Ajeti took both of his well. And I thought, which kind of maybe, I think it's got some traction on social media and stuff, but I think Joe Hart making that, all right, it wasn't an outstanding save, but it was a timely save. When County did manage to create a clear-cut opportunity, Celtic were only 1-0 up, he pulled off a good save. And then really when you think of the game itself, 3 points, 3 goals and a clean sheet, it's absolutely fair enough, really.
Yeah, looking at the highlights, it seems that Abada had a really good game. Ali got in behind loads, had loads of chances, didn't quite get his goal. Chances that, based on the way that he slotted in at Celtic, you would probably expect him to take more often than not. But it seems like with the absence of Kyogo, he was the most electric one on the park, happy to take on responsibility.
I have to say I've got some sympathy for Lil Abada. I think had it not been for the start that Kyogo Furuhashi made to his Celtic career, I think he might have stolen a few more headlines. I think he's had a sensational start. I think when you remember he's 19, coming into a new culture, a new club, a new language, a new system of playing. I think it's been a very seamless transition for him. I think he's hit the ground running. I think he looks very comfortable. He looks as though he's been there for way longer than the few months that he's been in Glasgow. I think he's slotted straight in, and you're right. I think on another day he might have had a hat trick before the break. I think, but I think he'll be there and amongst it. I think clearly double figures as a return this season.
Sean, first looks at Carter Vickers and Jota. What are the early impressions as far as you're concerned? Carter Vickers got his goal. It was a total fluke from 30 yards that deflected over Ross Laidlaw. Jota had a few flashes of brilliance. Is that fair?
I think both of that is fair, yeah. I think Carter Vickers conducted himself well. I didn't think he would start. I thought he would stick with Welsh. The only thing Welsh has really done wrong is the marking for the Rangers goal in the derby. I think everything else he's been really, really good. So I was surprised that Carter Vickers started, but nonetheless he got a goal, we got man of the match, and you can't really ask for much more on your debut. More importantly, I would think if he is to start on Thursday, then you would hope that the county match will have gave him some confidence among his new teammates, because clearly he'll be facing a more difficult challenge against Real Betis than what he did against County. With Jota, again, I thought it was a very confident performance. I thought he wanted to be involved right from the off, so there was no sign of him trying to ease into life at his new club or anything like that. He obviously likes a dribble. but he was consistently getting his crosses in as well. He wasn't dribbling down blind alleys. He was getting his crosses in. Came close to scoring, although he didn't. And I know he didn't create a goal either. He showed enough to have fans enthused about him going forward, definitely for me.
Certainly moves across the ground with the ball at his feet very quickly. And there was one moment in particular where the ball was switched from the right back area, it must have been Juranovic or Carter Vickers, over towards the left, and Jota was right in the touchline. And it hit off his chest. He took it down on his chest and killed it with his first touch like that. It was just an absolute supreme moment of quality, something that's very difficult to do, but he made it look like he could do it with his eyes closed. It was really impressive, just the little things like that. And then he went on a mazy run and eventually the ball went out for a goal kick. But yeah, Alison, the inclusion of Carter Vickers at the expense of Welsh, I think, might have raised a few eyebrows, because I think we've recognised on the briefing before that Starfelt needs a continual run of games to find his feet and become an integral part of the defence. But Welsh hadn't really done much, as Sean recognises there, to lose his place in the team.
Yeah, I was quite surprised by it too, I have to say. I hadn't anticipated it. I think if I look back to my predicted lineup Friday for Saturday, I'm fairly sure that Welsh was in there. Yeah, I think it's basically a question of experience, and I think quite clearly with one eye on Thursday night's game.
You think Welsh will start against Betis then?
No, I don't. I think it might be. I think it might be Cameron Vickers that goes in and starts.
I thought you meant that Welsh was being perhaps rested for the game. No, so you think right?
No, I think it was more an option to give him game time to introduce him rather than giving him his debut in a Europa League night.
Okay. Right, I think we need to address Ajeti as well, because he's waited for his moment. Sean, now you got a wee grin there on your face about Ajeti. I mean, he started last season on absolute fire. I think it was 5 and 6. He scored against Kelly later on in the season, but he just never really got his nose back in the team after the sort of first few rounds of fixtures. And I think that he's had to wait his time. I think we maybe expected Giacomakis to play until Ange Postecoglou said in his press conference that he would need a wee bit of time to get up to speed, probably. So that meant that, well, with Edouard away, it's Ajeti, Kyogo Furuhashi was injured. I suppose scoring 2 goals and a 3-0 win is taking your chance, isn't it?
Definitely. I mean, talking about the predictive lineups, I said in mine that Postecoglou would have a straight choice between Ajeti or Giacomakis, but it turned out, as you say, that the latter wasn't ready for the squad anyway. So that Ajeti then came in and scored twice it's totally to his credit. He's a different type of player to Kyogo, obviously, but he'd done what he was there to do by putting the ball in the net, and Ange himself was clearly happy enough with his contribution afterwards, and there's no reason why he can't. He won't necessarily start all the time, but there's no reason why if you get hit by injuries or anything like that he can't take his turn at playing through the middle, especially at home against teams like County.
I saw a lot of chat on Twitter praising Ajeti for his contribution, but also people saying that scoring 2 goals might not have reflected his actual overall contribution on the day. And I'll pull up a comment here from David Bradley saying that his movement needs to be a lot better. Now, you're just saying there, Sean, that he's not Kyogo Furuhashi. He's not going to be that sort of buzz bomb around the last line of defence. He's there to score goals in the box, so he's a different option. So as far as Ajeti is concerned, scoring goals is enough. Is that fair?
I think so. I think that's exactly what he'll be thinking, and I think there's not much you can complain about if someone starts having not started in a while and scores twice. But I do take the viewer's point that in this system and against most teams, maybe it was fine against County, and it obviously was if you scored twice. But in bigger games and more important games, you would obviously be looking for Kyogo because he's got the finishing, but he's also got that movement that sets the tone for the whole team and his relentless pressing and things like that. So I do take the point that maybe Ajeti hasn't got what Kyogo has got to bring to the team in general, but nonetheless, when he was given his chance, he scored twice, so you can't really complain too much.
Yeah, Frank Brennan kind of making that point. Unfortunately, it cuts off your face, Alison. I'll just take it back in a second.
It's a big improvement.
There's always place for an out-and-out poacher type team that is in the right place at the right time. So yeah, he's a different kind of striker to Kyogo Furuhashi and Edouard when he was here, and probably Giacomakis as well, who I think is a much more taller and powerful guy than Ajeti. But look, I think of his goal against Dundee United at the start of last season. He was just in the right place at the right time in the box to thump it home, and Celtic got the win. And at the weekend, he peeled off at the back post. And I don't actually think that was a very easy header, the first one. He had to time his jump perfectly because the cross was at some pace and he needed it. It wasn't as simple as just getting his head on it. He had to keep his neck strong and direct his head correctly. And the second one was a bit easier after McCarthy. His header was parried onto the bar, wasn't it? And it bounced down for Ajeti. But yeah, being in the right place at the right time, it's not just luck, Alison. You need to anticipate these things.
Yeah, without question. I think Ajeti will be fairly pleased with his afternoon's work. I think, like many people, I was surprised. I thought maybe the fact he had been so sparsely used since the arrival of Ange Postecoglou, I didn't anticipate him featuring much at all. So I think given an opportunity, coming in, scoring 2 goals, I think he'll be fairly relaxed about that. I appreciate what people are saying about movement and maybe not contributing enough. But I think you have to remember too, the context of him coming in, he's not played a lot of football at all. I think it can be quite difficult just to be brought straight into the team. And I also think too, there's a factor in all teams when you come back from an international break. I always think that first performance is quite sticky, just in the aftermath of players who have been all around the globe and then coming back, and you have very limited time to work with the cohesion of the squad before everyone goes back out again. But in terms of Ajeti, I think he'll be quietly satisfied that he's made a contribution and poses a few questions.
We won't get into the nitty-gritty of Betis preview just now. There's still a few days to go, but do we expect him then to continue up front after scoring 2 goals at the weekend, Sean?
Depends on the fitness, I suppose, of Giakoumakis. Obviously, Keogh goes out, or he would be the stick on. Again, 2 goals. You would imagine he very well might get that nod, even if Giakoumakis is fit enough to play a part. It very well might be Ajeti from the start and Giakoumakis on the bench if he's ready. But there's the lack of options again there anyway. So it's almost kind of got to be Ajeti unless Giakoumakis is fit to start.
It's a confidence thing though, because if you score twice when you're given your opportunity and that's not enough to then proceed in the next game when the main striker is injured and the only other option really is a new guy, then surely that says the manager doesn't fancy you if you're not given that chance to build on what you've started, Ali.
I think the problem and I think the issue in a situation like that is your attitude. I think it's really important not to be slighted by it. To be honest, he's at the club until January at the very least. I think all he can do is take the chances when they come, train hard. It sounds like a cliche, but it's about making sure you're in a position that when you do get the nod to play, that you have something to offer and you can go in and hit the ground running.
Well, Ange Postecoglou has been fairly complimentary about his attitude since he came in, recognising that he's had to wait for his chance because Edouard and Furuhashi were both there. But now neither of them can play. One's gone and one's injured, so I suppose now's the time. And yeah, he took it at the weekend, 2 goals. First one, really impressive header. Second one, right place, right time. So yeah, he took his chance. So Sean, Ali, that'll do us for today. We'll be back tomorrow and the rest of the week as usual to look ahead to the Betis game. Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers, Andy.